Good evening, everybody, and welcome. What a great crowd. It's great to have you here tonight. My name is Rick Mullaney. I'm the director of the Public Policy Institute here at Jacksonville University, and welcome to the 5th annual Hesburgh Lecture. Hard to believe it's been 5 years. This has been an extraordinary lecture series, and for those of you who've come over the last 5 years, I hope you agree. The lectures have been, I believe, exceptional. The first year was on the debt crisis in our economy, with the debt now approaching $20 trillion, or about $20 trillion. As I say in my class, you know, a ticking time bomb's never a problem as long as it's ticking. In the second year, it was about energy prices and the challenges in the energy sector and building energy independence. In the third year, we talked about climate change. And then last year, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court, very timely, 5 days before the election, and talking about what the impact of the election would be on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I can't, it was Professor Desch here, I can't promise that every speaker that after coming here, you'll be appointed by the President of the United States to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals and make the short list for the U.S. Supreme Court. But that's exactly what happened to last year's professor, Professor Amy Barrett. Congratulations to her. And by the way, and I thought the people from Notre Dame might appreciate my new favorite coffee mug, which has a picture of Professor Barrett, and the quote is, "The dogma lives loudly within you." I just thought you might appreciate that for those of you who appreciate the Senate hearings. I would hope you'd agree that these topics, debt service, energy, climate change, U.S. Supreme Court, and of course, tonight, foreign policy and national security, are timely, important, consequential, very significant. This lecture series honors Father Hesburgh, of course, who is not only an icon at Notre Dame, but is a national icon. But also this lecture series expresses the core values and beliefs of this institute, which is that policy matters. We believe it shapes the future, and we believe that good public policy improves the quality of life for our community, our city, our state, our nation, as we'll talk about tonight. This January will be 6 years since we started this institute, which will be just in time to help start preparing for the 6th annual Hesburgh Lecture for next year. And when we founded the institute 6 years ago, we founded on the notion that policy did matter, but on a very significant need. A need here in Florida in particular, but a need nationally, and that is the need to help educate, train, and prepare a whole new generation of leaders in public policy to serve in the public sector, in the nonprofit sector, and in the private sector. Of course, it's about the lecture tonight, and I don't know if it could be more timely, and maybe timely for unfortunate reasons. Earlier in the week, we saw an ICBM missile launched by North Korea, greatest range ever. A lot of talk about that missile potentially being able to reach the East Coast, and talks about whether or not it could carry a nuclear warhead sometime in the future. Certainly a sobering development. You saw the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, talking about this taking us a step closer towards war, but also her discussion as to what would happen if there was aggression from North Korea. You saw today in the New York Times an article talking about a potential shakeup in the Trump administration that may affect, the Secretary of State. So it's a very timely discussion that we will have, a significant discussion. We look forward to that, very much to having that discussion tonight. First, I do, however, want to introduce the president of the Notre Dame Club of Greater Jacksonville for a few brief comments. I think everybody here knows Pat Kilbane. Pat is a lawyer. Pat is a financial planner. Pat is himself a great community steward, serving on the board of directors for the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, serving on the Judicial Nomination Commission, also serving on the board of directors for the St. Vincent's Foundation. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the president of the Notre Dame Club of Greater Jacksonville, Pat Kilbane.
So 5 years ago is when I met Rick Mullaney. 5 years ago, I didn't know Rick. 5 years ago, I didn't know there was a public policy institute at Jacksonville University. And as much as I love Notre Dame, Rick Mullaney loves public policy. And Rick Mullaney came to speak at a group that I was a part of. And he was talking to us about this idea of a public policy institute in Jacksonville at JU. And I had just been elected as the president of our club, and I thought, wow, I think there's a real opportunity here. I think this idea that Rick has is really, really going to be special for our community. And for those of you who had some time here with our reception, if you saw the slideshow of the political leaders from our nation and our state that have funneled through this Public Policy Institute, if anybody who is interested in public policy, in politics, in government, and you have the opportunity to get a master's degree from this university in this program, I can't imagine you would go anywhere else. And I'm just beyond impressed at what Rick has built literally from the ground up. It is absolutely unbelievable. Our first Hesburgh lecture, maybe we had the first couple rows filled. There's not even a football game or a clerk for Justice Scalia, but we've got the chair of the political science department at Notre Dame to talk about foreign policy, and it is just truly special to see what this program and this partnership with JU has become. So Rick has become a fabulous friend, and our club is certainly proud of this program. We're not a group that just gets together and commiserates about our football seasons. We do community service activities, and we engage in continuing education also, and that's what this event's about. And Dr. Peter Fitzpatrick, who's one of our board members, he coordinates this Hesburgh lecture program for our club. So now I'll turn it over to Dr. Fitzpatrick, and he will introduce our speaker.
So it's with great pleasure I introduce tonight's Hesburgh lecturer, Michael Desch. He received his BA in Political Science from Marquette University and his master's and PhD from the University of Chicago. He's been a professor at Notre Dame's Department of Political Science since 2008 and served as the chair of that department from 2009 to 2015. In addition, he's also the director of the Notre Dame International Security Center. He is a fellow in both the Joan B. Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies and the Kellogg Institute for International Studies at Notre Dame. He's authored numerous books, book chapters, journal articles, scholarly reviews, and he's also a highly sought-after guest on radio and TV talk shows, and has a large presence in newspapers, magazines, as well as blogs, reviews, and exchanges. In fact, he is so active on numerous media that he has received the honor of Media Legend from the College of Arts and Letters at Notre Dame last year. I don't know how many people have that honor, but Media Legend. So we are certainly extremely happy to have tonight Michael Desch speaking to us for our 5th annual Hesburgh Lecture.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be down here, although they did not mention that Amy Barrett had been my predecessor last year. Had I known that, I might have found that my schedule would not permit me to come this year. I need some buffer between me and her. The one consolation I've got is, as Rick mentioned, there's some possible turmoil in the Trump administration's foreign policy team. So it's entirely possible that I could be appointed the next Secretary of State tonight before the end of the lecture. And by the time I get to the airport tomorrow, I could be fired. So I could join a long list. So I've got about a 3-hour PowerPoint deck up here. And I'm guessing, looking at the schedule, that you don't want to sit through all that. So I'll run through it relatively quickly. What I wanted to talk a little bit about is what's the animating core philosophy behind the foreign policy agenda of the Trump administration. So what will President Trump fight for in 140 characters or less? I got to start out with some disclaimers. The Latin scholars from pre-Vatican II Catholic education. What does caveat lector mean? Beware of the lecture, right? I have to confess to you, and it's probably useful in front of this audience to have some soul searching. But if you'd have come to me, if you'd invited me before Amy in 2015, I would have told you that of any of the 800 Republican candidates for president, 799 of them had a better chance than the current president of the United States. I mean, I thought, he came down that escalator in the spring of 2015. I thought he would have hit the bottom, fallen over, and that would have been it. And then I never thought he would have gotten the nomination. And then getting the nomination, I would have bet the $5 my wife gives me every month for my allowance on his opponent, Hillary Rodham Clinton. So I hope this isn't going to rescind the invitation. But what I'm trying to do is manage expectations, both in terms of physical appearance and in terms of expertise. But I will say, in my defense, I was hardly alone in getting this election, and particularly Donald Trump, wrong. And in fact, in looking back on the Trump election in 2016, I think it really represents a political earthquake. And there's a lot of realignment in our political system in terms of all of the issues, domestic politics, but also foreign policy, that I didn't see and a lot of my colleagues didn't see. In fact, you may know a little bit about political science. We're divided into 4 subfields or separate tribes. Tribes, by the way, that, like the Native American tribes in North America, are continually at war with each other. We have people like myself who do international relations. We have the comparative politics folks who are experts in other countries or regions of the world. We have political theorists, the people with the big brains who think the big thoughts. And then we have the American politics specialists. And the American politics specialists in political science are the men and women who use survey analysis and things like that to analyze American domestic politics. And they think they're the most scientific. We think other things, but that's another matter. But all of them got it wrong. In fact, there was this American politics professor from Princeton University who was on CNN a few weeks before the election, and like many of his colleagues who were looking at the polls, said there's no way that Donald Trump can win. And if he does win, I'm going to eat a bug. And Michael Smernish, I think is his last name, Smerconish, had not forgotten that. And so he had to eat a bug. I wasn't on CNN, and I wasn't so imprudent as to go that far. But I'm in pretty good company. But I think given the outcome of the election, and given that so many of us were so wrong about it, it's useful to think about why we missed what turned out to be a huge elephant in the room. And I think there were a number of things that led us astray. One is, and we're here at a public policy school, so we tend to be, in this sort of field, pretty wonky and think that what matters is expertise. And expertise does matter in politics, but not as much as we think it does. So we were betting on Hillary Clinton because she had been the co-president with Bill Clinton. She had been a senator from New York. She'd been Secretary of State. I mean, she had the resume that, was the resume from heaven. And we thought that that would be make her a shoo-in. Secondly, there's a powerful sort of inertia in terms of business as usual. And Hillary Clinton would have been the business as usual establishment president. Her husband, sort of represented the sea change in Democratic politics to take the party back to the middle, to emphasize the neoliberal approach to the economy and smaller government and things like that. And that's, I think, how Hillary Clinton had positioned herself as a candidate. Also, I think you've got to admit that academia tends to tilt to the left of the political spectrum. And given that Hillary was a Democrat and a lot of professors were Democrats, we were inclined to think that since that's how all of us thought, it was like the old story. Who was the Boston Brahmin who famously said that his mother-in-law could not understand how FDR ever was elected because nobody else on Beacon Hill had voted for FDR. Same problem with us and Hillary Clinton. And what we missed was that the 2016 election represented in important ways a rejection of all of these things that we thought were, literally sort of the third law of thermodynamics of politics. And this, I think, was true in general, but I think it was particularly true in foreign policy. And for me, sort of looking back and trying to walk the cat back and figure out what I got wrong, I went back to the first Republican debate at the Reagan Library at Simi Valley. And there were so many Republican contenders at that point that they had to haul in an extra Air Force One because, there were 18 people on the stage and they wanted the plane behind it, so by way of backdrop. But there was a really seminal moment that I didn't appreciate at the time, but which really, as I started thinking about it, came back to me. And that was the debate about the Iraq War. And Jeb Bush, in an exercise that spoke well of his family loyalty, but not so well in terms of his reading of the mood of the country, launched into a full-throated defense of his brother's invasion of Iraq in March of 2003. And he was joined by 16 of the 18 Republican candidates, in piling on to the bandwagon to Baghdad. The two exceptions to that were the perennially dyspeptic senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, who was sort of predictable on this score. But Donald Trump also said that he thought that the war had been a mistake. Now, there was some, questioning whether, in fact, he had, at the time, recognized the war as a mistake. But irrespective of what he thought at the time, I think he had tapped into an important element of the zeitgeist. And I've got some actual public opinion data that hopefully will persuade you of this. That indicated, even among Republicans, that there was a mood for a pretty dramatic change in terms of the foreign policy agenda. So we missed a lot of that, unfortunately. So the $64,000 or billion-dollar, trillion-dollar question, I guess because the Senate is debating the tax bill tonight, so we got to be thinking in trillions of dollars, is having won on a platform that, at least in foreign policy and national security, represented a significant critique not only of Barack Obama, but also of his Republican predecessor, George W. Bush. How is Donald Trump actually going to govern? And this is, it seems to me, an open question. But I think that there's good evidence to think that, well, there will certainly be elements of continuity in the Trump foreign policy. There's also going to be, and I think we're already seeing evidence of a significant break from the old Republican consensus about foreign policy and national security. And that's what I want to explore with you very briefly tonight, because we have a scripted program which mercifully for you reduces my unfettered speechification and ties me to adult leadership. So I'm going to run through this pretty quickly. Matter of fact, I'm not even going to show you the roadmap slide. So I want to talk a little bit about grand strategy and the elite consensus, just basically to set this up as a contrast to where I think the Trump administration is likely to go. When we talk about grand strategy, we're basically talking about how states use military force to support their larger foreign policy agendas. And when we think about this analytically, there are four sort of major categories of grand strategic approaches to the world. Primacy is the first one, and the one that I would argue has characterized American grand strategy since the end of the Cold War. And this is the notion that the only way for the United States to advance its interests and ensure peace and security in the rest of the world is if it's deeply engaged with the rest of the world and it's leading that effort to manage the common problems that the world faces. And in fact, there's a lot of continuity in commitment to a grand strategy of primacy going back as far as the effort under the first George Bush administration, George H.W. Bush, and the famous 1992 Defense Policy Guidance, which was basically aiming to prevent the emergence of any peer competitor to the United States. George H.W. Bush didn't embrace that, but that became the template that his son would subsequently embrace. And I would argue the Clinton and even the Obama administrations were all some version of primacy. Another option is collective security. And here the idea is that the United States needs to be deeply engaged in the world, but do so in a collaborative fashion and operate through international institutions. So American leadership is mediated through organizations like the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance or the United Nations. A third grand strategic possibility, and one that I think characterized the U.S. grand strategy during the Cold War, was selective engagement. And this is the approach to the world that during the Cold War was associated with classic realpolitik international politics. So names like George Kennan, Henry Kissinger, Hans Morgenthau, their view of the world basically that the United States should maintain a balance of power and protect a few of the key areas of the world was basically selective engagement as a grand strategy. Okay. Finally, today, there's a grand strategy that's out there that we call restraint. And this isn't isolationism, although you saw a lot of the debate, particularly during the 2016 campaign, that tried to tar restraint with Charles Lindbergh, Father Coughlin, and the isolationists of the interwar period. But restraint, as most academic realists think about it these days, is not about pulling back behind the moat, raising the drawbridge, and having nothing to do with the rest of the world. But rather, it's a different form of international engagement that involves the United States taking a less leading role in areas of the world where other countries can do the heavy lifting in terms of maintaining regional peace and security. I call this the grand strategy of Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Prussia, who unified Germany in the late 19th century and did it in a very sophisticated way that managed to build a major state in the middle of Europe without provoking a major conflict. His successors, of course, were less able to keep Germany out of trouble. Now, the basic argument that I'd make, and we could talk a little bit more about this in the Q&A, is that since the end of the Cold War, since 1993, some version of primacy or liberal hegemony has dominated how American presidents have thought about our engagement with the world. In fact, the argument that I would make is that there's less difference in terms of foreign policy between Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and even Barack Obama than one would have expected. And it was all a function of the fact that they were all committed to the notion that the United States needed to be deeply engaged in the rest of the world and indeed needed to be the world's policeman, the overarching hegemon to maintain peace and security. And you saw this sort of thinking during the Clinton administration when his second Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, went over to Europe and ruffled feathers among the Europeans. Not a bad thing in principle, I might add. But in this particular case, she told them, look, the United States is the indispensable nation. We see further, we see better than you folks do. And so when George W. Bush's Secretary of State, Condi Rice, by the way, Notre Dame alum, master's degree in government and international studies, said that we needed to be the world's guardian, she was basically singing from the same primacy sheet music that Madeleine Albright and Bill Clinton had been singing from. And you saw it even in the Obama administration as well. So what will be Trump's grand strategy? The short answer is, I don't know. I'm hoping you'll tell me, and then I can go back up to South Bend and tell the students about it. And there are a couple of challenges to figuring this out. I mean, with Hillary Clinton, she was in public life for a fairly long period of time. You knew because she was active with groups like the Council on Foreign Relations and things like that, you know, who she was talking to, what she was reading. And so you could predict what Hillary Clinton was going to do in terms of foreign policy pretty easily. President Trump, on the other hand, career prior to becoming president had been either in business or in the entertainment industry. So there weren't a lot of clues there about what he was going to do. So in the summer of 2016, in the midst of the general election, when he gave a highly touted speech at the Center for the National Interest in Washington, D.C. on foreign policy, a lot of people, myself included, were glued to the television set to try to get a window into what he was all about. And it was a remarkable speech because it was actually two speeches. The first half was a standard Republican boilerplate speech emphasizing the urgency of continued American leadership and deep engagement with the rest of the world. It could have been written by one of George W. Bush's speechwriters. So that's the first half of the speech. But the second half of the speech was something very different and seemed to recognize that the legacy of the, basically 20 years of uninterrupted American primacy had not been universally positive, and that we needed to think about a new approach to the rest of the world. I wrote a piece in U.S. News and World Report that sort of walks through chapter and verse of these positions if you're interested in seeing more about it. But this schizophrenia, this is the wrong use of this term, but it's the common use of it. Schizophrenia is not multiple personality. But nonetheless, there was from the very beginning in the Trump administration a multiple personality. Some of the people that he surrounded himself or he appointed to major national security positions were people who fit very well within the establishment Republican foreign policy position. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who was his first national security advisor for all of 24 days, very hardline in the sort of tradition of the American Enterprise Institute and the neoconservatives, that the key threat that we faced was Islamofascism. His current national security advisor, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, an active duty Army officer who served multiple times in Iraq, also a very hardline guy, particularly on the issue of Iran. Now, in McMaster's case, it was understandable because in the period from about 2005 through the drawdown in 2011, the Iranians were deeply engaged in the fight against the United States. And so, you could understand why he would not be all that happy about it. And Trump's ambassador to Israel, a guy by the name of David Friedman, very much in the sort of pro-Likud mindset that we ought to move the embassy to from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, that we should not be an honest broker between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but rather we ought to be supportive of our friends, meaning the Israelis. But there was also something different in the people that President Trump appointed to his cabinet. And Secretary of Defense, retired Marine General James Mattis, was a very interesting appointment to that position. President Trump loved this nickname Mad Dog Mattis, a nickname that, by the way, General Mattis himself hates because he's anything but the sort of Marine general, kill them all, let God sort them out mindset from central casting. In fact, Mattis is a very, very well-read and very thoughtful military officer, and he was also somebody who was willing to say that sometimes putting the wood to your enemy or people you think are your enemy is not a good way to win friends and influence people. And the quote I loved from him was in the context of the debate about enhanced interrogation. General Mattis said, "I don't think we need waterboarding." He said, "Give me a six-pack and a pack of cigarettes, and I'll get a lot more good intelligence out of a captured insurgent than I would with a waterboard." Now, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, I actually modified or edited my PowerPoint deck yesterday, and it may already be obsolete at this point. But former Secretary of State, or soon-to-be former Secretary of State, or twisting in the wind in the media, Rex Tillerson, was also an interesting appointment in the sense that he was somebody who had a long history of doing business in Russia, and coming from the oil industry, that's not surprising. But what is surprising is he was one of the few Republican political figures who are willing to say, we can do business with Vladimir Putin. And in fact, both Mattis and Tillerson have, for different reasons, been very supportive of the continuing adherence by the United States to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. That's a mouthful. The common language name for this is the Obama-Iran nuclear deal. And both had urged President Trump to certify continuing Iranian compliance with the terms of this agreement, even though among most Republicans, Iran is a dirty word. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop after this slide. So how do I make sense of where Trump is coming from? Well, I want to argue that President Trump is reflecting a long-standing, but for a while deeply submerged current in American political culture related to how we think about foreign policy. And for shorthand, I'm going to call him a Jacksonian. Now, this is not a Jacksonvillian, although maybe the President Andrew Jackson at some point in his career was in the general area. But what is Jacksonianism? Well, Jacksonianism was a term that was coined by a guy at the Council on Foreign Relations by the name of Walter Russell Mead. And he wrote a very interesting book and a series of articles about the different foreign policy cultures in America. And he identified these as being Jeffersonian, which is basically a sort of approach that supports the spread of American-type democracy around the world. Hamiltonianism, a strong state for the United States. Wilsonianism, the idea that through the establishment of institutions like the League of Nations, we can manage the world. And then Jacksonianism itself. Now, the core tenets of Jacksonianism really come down to about 5 different things. First of all, it's highly nationalist. Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory, was, before he was president, a military leader and war hero in the United States. And he made his name basically driving foreigners out of North America. And so this notion of America first resonates quite deeply with this Jacksonian nationalism. But what's more important is the populist component. I mean, nationalism can be an elite or it can be a mass movement. And what's distinctive about Jacksonianism is its populist base. So the problem for the Jacksonian is that we've got all these liberal elites. We've got all these cosmopolitans, people who go every year to Davos in Switzerland and talk about how to further open up the international economy, and we don't like that. These are the avatars of globalization, and globalization is doing all sorts of things to this country that Jacksonian populists don't like. Sucking our jobs to other countries, flooding us with immigrants, things like that. And that really comes from this Jacksonian persuasion. Thirdly, Jacksonians have a negative definition of American exceptionalism. They believe America is exceptional, but they don't believe that we ought to, by virtue of this exceptional nature, go out and try to spread our way of life to other countries. The Jacksonian basically says we're exceptional because the rest of the world is rotten, and we would be well served to avoid getting mixed up with these sorts of folks. It also has a deeply pessimistic view of international relations. Thomas Hobbes famously wrote in his classic work, The Leviathan, about what life in the state of nature was like. It was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And that's how the Jacksonians see the rest of the world. Jacksonians are also, because Andrew Jackson himself and many of the parts of the country that are sort of the seedbed of Jacksonianism came from Scotch-Irish roots. And this is, you want to see the real fighting Irish. It's not my ancestors, the Irish Catholics. It's the Scotch-Irish. And a big part of Scotch-Irish culture is the whole notion of the importance of maintaining honor. And you see this a lot, by the way, in President Trump's rhetoric, not only during the campaign, but also in various contexts as president. I mean, what's bad about the Iran nuclear deal? Well, there are a lot of, sort of wonky, niggling things that he doesn't like about the Iran nuclear deal. But the thing that really gets in his craw is that he thinks the Iranians took us to the cleaners. They bamboozled us. And that's an affront to our honor. And in fact, this view, I think, resonates more broadly. And then finally, the Jacksonians, and this is where the restraint piece comes in. The Jacksonians are not about forever war, the permanent employment of American troops to keep the peace all around the world. They very much are the civilian political version of the old Powell Doctrine. Remember Colin Powell, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? His famous Powell Doctrine was, we're only going to go to war when it's really in America's interest. And if we do that, we're going to throw everything at them but the kitchen sink. We're going to go over there and clean up that mess, and then we're going to come home. And that's what Jacksonians basically go for. So in the interest of keeping some semblance of adherence with the program, I'm going to just stop here and say I think Trump is a Jacksonian. I got a bunch of slides that hopefully Rick will provoke me into showing you that provide some concrete evidence about various elements of public opinion that support this. But the point is if you want to understand Trump, you need to understand that he was elected in the Jacksonian moment, that there was a significant body of public opinion that found some or all of these core elements of Jacksonianism resonant with their situation. And with that, Rick, I'll stop and we can go to the Q&A here.